Hello everyone, my name is Jaana Pirskanen and I work as a project coordinator here at SETA. And SETA is a Finnish LGBITQ+ rights organization in Finland. I coordinate a TIKA project that focuses on intersex human rights and well-being. And here today with me I have Kitty Andersson, and she is an intersex activist from Iceland. And she is the co-chair of European Intersex organization, OII Europe, and also a co-founder of Intersex Iceland. So I'm so happy that you are here today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We could start with the basics. What does intersex stand for?
So intersex as a word is an umbrella term for people who are born with variations when it comes to their sex characteristics. So sex characteristics are sort of the parts of the body we connect with someone's sex. So this can be your hormones, what hormones you produce, what levels, how you respond to hormones. It can be connected to your chromosomes, it can be connected to your reproductive system. But it can also appear in secondary sex characteristics. Secondary sex characteristics is basically everything that happens during puberty. But intersex as a term is more than sort of just this sort of biological reality. It's also sort of this sociological experience of living in a world that doesn't recognize that your biology is valid, that your biology is fine. Living in a world that tells you that there's something about your biology which is a sickness or a disorder, which they're not. I mean, intersex bodies are just part of human variation. We've been around forever. Intersex people have always existed, but especially in the Western world, then in the 20th century, mid-20th century, there was a high emphasis on secrecy, that this isn't something that should be talked about, that this was shameful, that this was a taboo, that somehow our existence disrupted the social order. And if you think about what society was like in the 50s, well, it's easy to see.
Yes.
Why people would think that. But we're not living in the 50s anymore, so what started then and sort of has continued in practice, teaching intersex kids, intersex teenagers not to talk about who they are, not to find community. I mean, it's 2019, we should be far past this, but
Yes.
Unfortunately we haven't come far enough yet. But we're getting there.
Yes. Could you tell about your organization, OII Europe? What is it and how long it has been doing human rights work?
So the history of OII Europe, when you ask how old OII Europe is, that's complicated. But OII Europe was first founded as sort of more of an informal network in Europe in 2012 on Human Rights Day. However, from 2012 until 2015, it was an unregistered network. In 2015, a group of us came together in Berlin and registered OII Europe as a pan-European NGO with headquarters in Berlin. And yeah, we've been sort of growing the organization, strengthening the organization. We went from basically a group of volunteers with zero funding in 2015 to today we have an office in Berlin, We have a full-time executive director, a part-time finance and admin officer, and a part-time campaigns and awareness officer. So we've sort of expanded the organization from very, very grassroots volunteers sort of trying to set up a strong European network into a sustainable, or as soon as we get more funding, a relatively sustainable organization. We have member organizations in, basically across Europe, in every European region. I haven't counted in the last few months, but I think we just went over 20 member organizations.
Great.
So, bearing in mind that not that long ago most countries didn't even have an intersex organization, we see this growth as very, very, very positive. And in addition to our member organizations, then we're also in connection with individual intersex activists in even more countries.
Yes.
Who we hope will form their own organizations and join us in the near future.
Great. It sounds amazing, the work you're doing and how it's expanding the human rights work you're doing. What are your main goals?
So, our overarching goal is the full realization of human rights of intersex people. And the main goal there, of course, is children's rights, the protection of children from invasive, irreversible medical procedures that are based on social or cultural or psychosocial grounds. But in addition to that, it's also training, education. I mean, we need to move towards a psychosocial sort of support approach when it comes to intersex kids, but still far too few psychologists and social workers are actually educated on the issues that these children face. Also, just general, especially for when it comes to adults, general anti-discrimination legislation, hate crime, hate speech legislation, because when you've been taught to hide and that like who you are as a person is in some way shameful, why would you come out and be public in a world where that might lead to you being discriminated against, that might lead to you losing your job? You wouldn't.
Yes.
Just based on the security aspect, like if you can't be sure that you are protected, then it's safer to stay hidden.
Yeah.
So yeah, legislative work, education. We do a lot of community building. The first ever OII Europe community event was in Vienna, 2017. We had 27 people there, which at that point in time was like, wow, there are so many of us. We had our second OII Europe community event in Copenhagen last year, where there were 50 intersex activists coming together to meet and share. It was amazing. And again, last year we were like, wow, there are so many of us. Yes. Like, how can we even top this? And we're expecting even more this year.
Yeah, so it's getting bigger and bigger because people, they hear about you and they want to engage with activism and maybe get the courage as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this year we'll have representatives from countries that haven't been represented before, which is always like, that's always so big. Like, wow, there is like something happening in this new country now. It's so wonderful.
Yes. So great to hear. What do you think, what is the relationship between intersex human rights activism and LGBITQ+ organizations?
That kind of depends on where you are.
Yeah.
We have, and honestly it depends on the individual organizations, we have some great LGBTIQ organizations in Europe doing great work, and on intersex issues as well. What I've been seeing here at SETA is really amazing. Samtökin 78, the National Queer Organization of Iceland, has been doing amazing work when it comes to education. Copenhagen Pride has supported OII Europe in the past, especially when it came to our community event in Copenhagen. So there are a lot of sort of great collaborations happening, and then of course there are organizations that maybe don't have connections to intersex people or just aren't focused on these issues so much. When it comes to intersex and LGBTIQAP, it's a complicated relationship in some ways. But it shouldn't be. When it comes to basically all of our communities under this umbrella, medicine once used to view us as more or less the same. We were all somehow disordered or wrong. We all needed to be fixed.
Yes.
So the way that happened with intersex, especially children, was the normalization and basically the intersex genital mutilation practices that originated in the 50s. And when it comes to LGBT, the same medical community at the same time was institutionalizing people, subjecting them to extreme medical torture to get them to conform to society's ideals of what is acceptable.
Yes.
And somehow, and I think this is because what happened to intersex people happened in childhood, but of course if you're LGBT, it's not quite visible the moment you're born.
Yeah.
You come out at some point in your life.
Yeah.
That created sort of this disconnect between the communities, that one group sort of was being subjected to this at a point in their life where they could actually voice an opinion on it, whereas the other one, far before they could even speak.
Yes.
But there is still a bit of a divide. I mean, that comes directly from the medical community.
Yeah.
It was their sort of goal to ensure that intersex kids would not be gay. That was the worst thing. It was, they wanted to ensure that intersex kids agreed with the gender they were as forcibly subjected upon them. So they became, the medical community has a huge role in dividing sort of the LGBTIQ community. They pathologized us all the same, and then divided us into quadrants and groups that weren't working together. I sort of view the LGBTIQAP movement kind of like a union for human rights.
Yes.
And I sort of view the LGBTIQ movement as sort of a coalition of different unions coming all together to sort of work together.
Yes.
So that's sort of my take on intersex and the LGBTIQ. It's also important that intersex people know that being part of the LGBTIQ doesn't mean that they can't have their own spaces and their own organizations and their own sort of activities, and that's important as well.
Yes.
It isn't one monolith group that are all the same.
Yes.
It's a coalition that embraces human diversity, and That's something sort of we all share. We are part of human diversity.